10. Spider-Man Punisher. On Earth 71928, location of the What If Peter Parker Became the Punisher story, Peter's life remained pretty much the same as Earth 616 Peter, that is, until the night Uncle Ben's life was drawn to a close. Instead of following the classic story, Peter caught and dispatched the killer using the same weapon that took his uncle's life. Now Peter tried to avoid going full murderous Punisher at first, trying to go his normal route, but since criminals are criminals and they always come back, and he knows how much more permanent of a solution it is to just take them out, he went full force into that lifestyle. He carried the blam blam that took his Uncle Ben's life, as well as other weaponry with multiple different types of ammunition that allowed him to take down the Sinister Six with ease, and he was even able to save Gwen Stacy. Going by Punisher Spider, his suit also took a skull logo instead of the traditional spider logo due to the fact that the spider that gave him his powers was a noble false widow, which has a cephalothorax that looks like a skull, and it's not because he wanted to look like the Punisher. I promise. Number 9. Spider-Man 2099. Miguel O'Hara. Instead of getting bitten, Miguel's DNA was biologically mixed with the spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly addicted to a future substance by his employer. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel was still granted many of the same abilities at a pretty similar level. One thing that differs largely is Miguel's spider sense. He doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses similar to someone like Daredevil, but further straying from the 616 Peter Parker, Miguel has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him. For example, he possesses an incredible level of super speed as well as telepathic communication abilities. His webs are also organic, which differs from Spider-Man's web shooters, and he also has fangs and claws on his fingers and toes that he can use in combat. But on top of all those powers, Miguel is from the year 2099. Which means obviously that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal, mainly focusing around his suit, which is incredibly durable and has an artificial intelligence, which is just cool. Number 8. Spider's Man. In Spider-Geddon number 3 of 2018, we are introduced to Spider's Man, which is a colony of thousands of radioactively powered spiders who, in a moment of absolute horror, consumed a high school boy by the name of, let me just check my notes here. Oh, Peter Parker, when he fell into their enclosure at Horizon Labs. After consuming Peter, something strange happened. Instead of the spiders just going about their lives, the whole gaggle of spiders gained a sort of hive mind, and they took on the form of Peter himself and began fighting crime in the aptly named Cruel York of Earth 11580. Now, other than his usual Spider-Man powers and the benefits of being a swarm of spiders, the colony is also able to poison its victims with a bite, or if they're hungry for power, devour them whole, and it's incredibly hard to actually de-life this version of Spider-Man, as even a single spider of the thousands who make up this being survives. It means that technically, Spider-Man is also still alive, and it can and will eventually multiply to rebuild itself. Himself? Their self? One of those. You know what I'm saying. Number 7. Poison. One never truly forgets their first love. And that's apparently true for formless, tar-like, brain-eating aliens too. Ever since the first time Venom and Spider-Man bonded together, that pesky symbiote would continuously try to merge with Peter Parker, but he would only get about halfway before Peter could repel him. Now, what happens if Venom finally gets what he wants? In the What If Spider-Man the Other story, we get to find out. After Peter is semi-defeated by Morlun and cocoons himself under Brooklyn Bridge, he's offered the chance to be resurrected by the Spider God. But instead of allowing this like he does in the normal continuity, Peter refuses and is instead stuck inside of his cocoon like half alive. Now you cut to Venom, who, being Spider-Man's crazy ex-girlfriend, senses the vulnerability of his soulmate and completely ditches his current host, Mac Gargan, and he goes to intercept Peter's body. And after months and months of struggling inside the cocoon, monstrously breaking down Peter Parker, Venom fully bonds to Peter. Now, the pair are truly one, which is something Venom always wanted, with all the fully realized powers that come with being a symbiote, which include being able to replicate itself and host more than one body. He can also produce stingers that are strong enough to pierce Luke Cage's skin, which is insane, and the newly dubbed being known as Poison was even able to resurrect Gwen Stacy in a form that seems to take after Venom's offspring Carnage, although I'm not too sure about that one. Number 6. 6. The Amazing Spider. It appears that Uncle Ben leaving this plane of existence is actually a really good thing. Hear me out. See, on Earth 11638, Uncle Ben never loses his life, and instead, he helps train Peter Parker with his new Spider-Man powers, and eventually even helps him to form Parker Industries. Now things aren't all hunky-dory though, as you can probably guess. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure alternate versions of himself to this reality where he absorbs their powers to increase his own, making him the most powerful hero on the Earth and eliminating the need for any other superhero. See, that did take a very dark turn. But when he tried to do this to the Spider-Man from Earth 616, this powerful version of Peter loses his life and his soul is sent to Hell, where, with the assistance of the Infernal Hulk, he is fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Spider. Now it's not the Gwen Stacy Ghost Spider, but a Ghost Rider Spider, which is just fun to say, and that's what I'm gonna go with. Ghost Rider, for any who don't know, is insanely powerful. He has been called in to deal with the Hulk and has even gone toe-to-toe with Galactus. So, this Spider-Man Ghost Rider, or Spider Ghost Rider, which I said I was gonna call him, I'm getting mixed up with words now, is no joke. He's no joke at all. Plus, he looks really cool. Number 5. Phoenix Force Spider-Man. Okay, so this is a slightly more confusing pick for this list. Most fans of Marvel Comics know that the Phoenix Force is an incredibly powerful entity within the universe, essentially the embodiment of life itself. Many characters have played the role of hosts for the Phoenix Force, and not always with the best outcomes. But Spider-Man wielding the immense power of the Phoenix Force first appeared in a comic in Spider-Man number 25 in 1990. Now unfortunately though, this was later revealed to just be an illusion. But since it was so incredibly awesome to see, it inspired another appearance. However, this time it was taken by a video game. Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, which actually saw Peter Parker wielding the Phoenix Force with real Phoenix Force powers. It's not comic books, but it happened, so it's kinda cool. Number 4. Cosmic Spider-Man. There was a point in time when Peter Parker of Earth 616 absorbed the Enigma Force and became the most powerful version of Spider-Man we have ever even seen. Even capable of punching the Hulk into orbit. Now in the mainline continuity, he doesn't have it for very long, but on Earth 13, he kept the powers and became the hero Captain Universe. So this Peter Parker has all the usual Spider-Man powers, but also now has cosmic awareness, energy manipulation, giving him energy blasts and flight. He can manipulate matter, making his webs as strong as adamantium, or even changing their shape altogether. He has fought and wiped the floor with some truly strong foes like Thor, Graviton, and of course the Hulk, and he never truly hit his upper limit of strength and power, even when he cleaned up all the oceans and threw all the Earth's trash into the sun. His universe became a safe haven for all the Spider-Men and Spider-Women in the multiverse when the Inheritors were hunting them down, because Captain Universe could defeat them, and his cosmic powers are gone when he leaves this dimension. Now unfortunately, he is consumed by Solus, who was allowed to get a hold of him and used his powers against him in Amazing Spider-Man number 11 in 2014, but if we don't think about that, we just look at all the other stuff, pretty powerful. Pretty unstoppable. Number 3. Cosmic Comic Spider-Man. Now look, I've talked about this version of Spider-Man a few times, and I'm sorry if it's getting old, but it's cool. The comic he appears in is actually just a guide on how to read comic books, and through the course of the story, it basically becomes a love letter to comic books themselves. It's really good if you love comic books, you should definitely check it out. In How to Read Comics the Marvel Way, issues 1 to 4, the comic itself becomes a character, and it starts off trying to teach the reader how exactly to read comics. The comic follows Spider-Man in a conflict with Mysterio, who found the Cosmic Comic, the same one speaking to us, in the basement of the Natural History Museum. It allowed Mysterio to freeze Spider-Man in time in a comic panel, turn inanimate objects to life, and increase his size. Now after causing more problems by tearing the comic book in half, Peter Parker eventually learns that he himself is a comic book character. He can see all of time laid out as a comic panel. He trapped Mysterio in an airline passenger safety card, which is essentially a comic book if you think about it, and then he pulled him out of that comic. He created comic book shops to combat the dip in popularity of comics themselves, and he even breaks the fourth wall and begins to talk to the reader. Essentially, Spider-Man temporarily had control over comic books themselves, which if you think about it, is similar to, but even more powerful than the ability of a comic book character to warp reality. Number 2. Power of Love Spider-Man. Okay, so this isn't really an alternate version of Spider-Man. This is still 616 Peter, but merged with the nexus of all all realities, gaining enough power to fight the Outrider. The story is actually a little difficult to follow and understand. It took me some time, so it may be because I'm just lacking in brain cells, or it may be that it's all very convoluted and the art isn't exactly clear. So if I get any information here wrong, feel free to correct me, please. But as for the power Spider-Man possesses here, he doesn't actually do much, aside from facing Outrider, that is, if you consider not doing much as destroying and recreating multiple different universes in order to save all of creation. So he does a lot. And that sentence alone does kind of speak volumes about the power that Spider-Man possessed for a little while. The story is in Peter Parker's Spider-Man Annual #1, and you should definitely check it out so that you can figure out everything I just said, because I think I messed it up. #1, Beyonder Spider-Man. For this point, we are talking about regular old Peter Parker from Spider-Man and Secret Wars #4, when he temporarily gains the powers of the Beyonder. Now, before Dr. Doom was granted the Beyonder's powers in Secret War, the Beyonder power actually went to 2 others. Once the power left the Beyonder himself, it actually went straight to Wolverine, who absolutely could not handle the power at all, so he almost immediately bestowed it onto Spider-Man. With this power, Spider-Man turns Doc Ock into plants, he obliterates a big group of villains, easily rips apart Ultron, literally stomps on the Molecule Man, and defeats Galactus with his fists. He brings a city from the 32nd century into the modern day, creating a new Parker City. He saves Uncle Ben on like 3 separate occasions, just bringing him back to life, like through reality. But then we learn that all this happened in like 1/100000th of a second before Dr. Doom took the power back for himself, which is the way it ended up being and was supposed to be the whole way. Coming in at #10 is Earth 616. Most fans of Miles Morales know this already, but for those who aren't aware, the Miles Morales that has become the second Spider-Man and who all the alternate Miles are based on is actually not native to the main Marvel universe. That Miles actually comes from Marvel's Ultimate Universe, the Earth 1610 universe. So then, that kind of begs the question of who and where the heck is the main continuity Miles Morales? Well, he's there, but he is much different. Miles Morales was a member of the Rigoletto crime family who ended up with a 3-year sentence in Rikers Island to cover for his cousin, which got him the respect of the family and of Wilson Fisk, who Miles saved in prison. Miles and Fisk opened a restaurant together after they both got out, and when Wilson took over the crime family, he let Miles go and live a happy life with his wife. Unfortunately though, when his wife passed away, Miles went to find the same woman in an alternate universe, which brought him into conflict with Peter Parker and the main Miles Morales Spider-Man, and eventually brought him to Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe, where he found his love again. Now when he returned to Earth 616, Miles had outfitted himself with an Ant-Man suit, Iron Man repulsors, and a Captain America looking shield, and he brought some friends in order to face his younger Miles counterpart and try and run the streets of New York once again. #9, Thor. Last year, in 2022, in case you were watching this from the future, we got a whole series of What If comics centered specifically around the character of Miles Morales, and each issue of that comic gave us a different Miles who had taken after a different hero. For the 4th issue of this series, the World Tree of Yggdrasil had found itself in Brooklyn, creating a version of Brooklyn that was Asgardified, or an Asgard that has been Brooklynified. I guess, you pick. In case you haven't guessed, the Miles Morales of temporary reality number 951 has indeed become Thor Odin's son. All the other classic pillars of the Thor mythos are here too, substituted with Miles' mom and dad for Frigga and Odin, his friends substituting as the Warriors 3, and of course his uncle Aaron as the trickster god Loki, who tricks Thor Odin's son Morales into stealing the skull of the frost giant Laufey in order to impress his pops. If you check this one out, please let me know what you think of all the rhyming and rapping this version of Miles tries to do, and if it made you cringe like it made me cringe, because it really did make me cringe like quite a lot. Why did they do that? I don't know. #8, Ultimate Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham is one of the most popular alternate versions of Spider-Man out there, but he is just an alternate version of Peter Parker. Luckily for us, his popularity coupled with the popularity of Miles Morales gave us Miles Morhames. Yes, that is his name, and he is the ultimate spider pig. As is the case in seemingly all universes, Miles' uncle was secretly a masked criminal known in this universe as the Fowler. One of the items Fowler had stolen turned out to be a radioactive spider, which is the one that bit Miles, granting him his spider abilities. Following the passing of the original Spider-Ham when he defeated the Green Gobbler once and for all, Miles stepped up to take his mantle in order to become the ultimate Spider-Ham. The world that Miles hailed from, Earth 14094, ended up actually being destroyed by Dr. Doom after the world was saved from Galactopus, who, he's not an octopus, but get this, Galactus is a platypus. I mean, come on. I feel like I'm way too excited about this. After the destruction of his reality, Miles traveled the multiverse, warning other universes of how to protect themselves against calamity until he arrived on Earth 1610, where he stayed. Number 7. Hulk. I wasn't done with the What If Miles Morales stories yet. I can't just give you guys one of those awesome Miles Moraleses. I can give you all the Miles Moraleses. Yeah, Miles Morales in this issue is very much like his normal self until the day that Uncle Aaron made a deal with Emil Blonsky. Aaron found himself in possession of a suspicious briefcase. Noticing a spider on said briefcase, Miles attempted to kill it, but instead accidentally knocked over the briefcase, which caused him to step on a nuclear cartridge, exposing himself to gamma radiation, and well, he got Hulkified in the middle of the night. Miles tries to keep his transformations on the down low and under control, enlisting the help of his friend Genki, who didn't believe him until Miles stepped on a Lego, which, as we all should know, causes a rage and turned him into the Hulk. Eventually, Miles spied on his uncle as the Prowler as he was dealing with Emil, which is when his uncle made an attempt at Emil's life. Now during the kerfuffle, another briefcase was dropped and Uncle Aaron also found himself being exposed to gamma radiation, but this time he was turned into the Abomination. Number 6. Into the Spider-Verse. Yes, of course we have to talk about the version of Miles Morales appearing in the awesome animated Spider-Verse movies. Voiced by actor Shameik Moore, this version of Miles Morales brought the character to a very large audience with an origin story that differed slightly from his original counterpart, but it also still retains enough elements of that original story, which I believe is part of the reason his universe designation is Earth 1610B instead of having its own separate reality number. The best part of this Miles Morales though is when the Spider-Verse opens up and he gets to interact with the various other Spider-Men and women across the multiverse. The first movie was an absolute hit. It had a dope soundtrack, an amazing animation style with a superb cast, hilarious writing, and a heap of heartfelt moments. Now I have yet to see the sequel, but I am super excited to see where this Miles Morales goes with his story. Number 5. Mayor. This version of Miles Morales comes at us from the series known as The End, which basically chronicles the final stories of various different heroes in the Marvel landscape. Some of the most famous of these stories have been the Hulk The End and Deadpool The End, but for Miles Morales, his possible alternate future takes place decades from now in a ravaged place that was once New York City. Most places on Earth had been ravaged by monsters known as the Germs, with Brooklyn being one of the few places that had been saved and protected by this massive shield. Side note, I like how germs are the monsters here. Like, it's kind of like all those things you learn about as kids when germs were like little monsters, but now they're actual monsters. Kind of hilarious, kind of cool. I don't know. But after becoming Spider-Man and letting the world know his identity, Miles was chosen as mayor of Brooklyn and as its protector. He faced off against a Captain America wannabe known as Captain Last and his One America army of raiders. After Captain Last eventually merges with a germ in order to attack Brooklyn, Miles sacrifices his life to bring the Captain down and save the lives of everyone in Brooklyn. Good job. Way to go. Number 4. Wolverine. Yep, it's another Miles Morales what if, and I don't know why Wolverine is the last person I expected to see in this series, but I'm extremely okay with it. Miles Morales in this world is instead a mutant with the same abilities as Wolverine. When he is younger, Miles is stolen away alongside other children by Weapon X, who turn him into the adamantium skeleton superweapon just like the regular Wolverine. Now fast forward a few years, and now in this world, Sentinels are being used to hunt down mutants by S.H.I.E.L.D. And after Miles takes out like 3 of them, S.H.I.E.L.D. sends this super cool looking warrior wielding an adamantium katana to take Miles out. This awesome SHIELD warrior turns out to be Miles' father, and once he discovers this Wolverine mutant is his own son, he instead turns on SHIELD. Which is when they send in Miles' uncle Aaron, who seems to be this world's version of Sabretooth. Miles' father defends his son to his dying breath until Miles jumps in to beat Sabretooth to a pulp and almost ends him before his father convinces him not to and to instead be a hero. It all wraps up with the X-Men showing up to recruit Miles, but led by Professor X, who is Genki Lee. It's just wild, it's so cool. Number 3, Vision Miles. No, this is not a highly advanced android version of Miles Morales. It is, in fact, the Miles Morales who exists in a possible future shown to us in a vision from the inhuman precog known as Ulysses Kane. The reason I want to talk about this seemingly insignificant version of Miles Morales who only appeared in a vision is because this Miles was able to take the life of Captain America. Now obviously Captain America is not an indestructible guy. He's not the most powerful hero and he could probably be taken out by any number of heroes, but the respect that Captain America carries and the influence he has makes him one of those characters that you simply do not see being taken out very often. So, to see it happen here in Civil War II at the hands of Miles Morales on the steps of the ruined United States Capitol building in the reality of Earth 61115 is one hell of a shocking image. I want to know what happens after Miles does this, but we won't know until a writer decides to take the initiative to put out a story set in this alternate crazy reality. Number 2, the Falcon. Temporary reality number 852 gave us a Miles whose history is similar to his Earth 1610 counterparts, only he never gained powers from a genetically engineered spider. Instead, this Miles' favorite heroes were the totally underrated Nighthawk and his sidekick and partner, the Falcon. Unfortunately, like how Spider-Man lost his life to the Goblin in the Ultimate reality, in this one it's the Falcon that ultimately croaked at the hands of the Goblin. This devastated Miles, and he took it as his opportunity to take the reins. Creating a costume similar to the Falcon's using his electrical engineering skills, Miles aided Nighthawk as he was battling the villains Scorpion and Scorpia. But Nighthawk was not too receptive to this pretender coming in and trying to replace his old partner. Wanting to prove to Nighthawk that he could be a hero, Miles created the Young Squadron with Kid Spectrum and Girl Power. While Miles and the Young Squadron were fighting the Wrecking Crew, Miles was stolen away by the Goblin's partner Deadpool, who was attempting to make sure the Falcon Mantle never came back. Deadpool was eventually defeated by the other members of the Young Squadron, and after handing Deadpool over to Nighthawk, Miles and the Young Squadron decided to be a better team than the other heroes of their reality. And finally, in at number 1, Captain America. Yes, we are rounding off today's list with the very first of the What If Miles Morales stories, which in my opinion is one of the best. In the very first issue, Miles' dad is part of the new super soldier program inspired by the original that created Captain America. Uncle Aaron, who always plays a large part in Miles' life, steals the super soldier serum and keeps it in his fridge, which is where Miles finds it looking for a drink. It turns out Miles is actually a perfect match for the serum, and he becomes the new Captain America. It's super cool because not only is Miles the new Cap, but Tiana Toombs becomes the Falcon and Sam Wilson becomes the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. with the eye patch and everything. Uncle Aaron becomes Prowler after being attacked by Black Widow, and Lonnie Lincoln is the Grey Skull, which is this reality's Red Skull. Miles here seems to be just as powerful as the normal Captain America, if not a little younger and by extension, a little bit more naive. Starting off our list at number 10 is Assassin Spider-Man. In What If Spider-Man vs. Wolverine number 1, we are introduced to Spider Assassin, a Spider-Man variant who is just a little bit more loose when it comes to the morals he follows. In his universe, with great power comes great responsibility and greater enemies, which led the Peter of Earth 8351 to leave New York City in order to protect his family from the villains who would make personal strikes. Instead, Peter joined up with Wolverine, and because of their time traveling and working together, he is much less opposed to sending criminals to the afterlife, meaning he does it on the regs. He's also almost always serious, not resorting to the usual quips and jokes that we are used to Peter using to cope with difficult or precarious situations anymore. His serious nature is also reflected in his costume, with a much darker look, especially with those black eyes. I really dig it. His web shooters have also been shown to shoot black webs in some panels, and they also include some more lethal means of dealing with his foes. He is an effective addition to the Spider Army when it was formed transformed and an extremely effective Spider-Man indeed. Number 9. The Spider. There are a lot of characters who go by the name of the Spider, including a pulp hero from way back in the day, but specifically, we are talking about a Peter Parker variant that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote coming from Earth 15. The Spider of Earth 15 is a much more sadistic, sociopathic, red-headed version of Peter Parker. He even claims that he has been sentenced to a total of, quote, 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes that he has committed. But of course, to make him just a bit more lovable, he has a sense of humor very much like that of Deadpool. It's great, if not a little unnerving. The Spider was introduced in Exiles number 12 and was a big part of the reality-saving Weapons X team featured in it. Being a sometimes leader of the team, as a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful. But he was nonetheless sent to the afterlife by a blast from Firestar in Exiles number 44. Because when you're dealing with the multiverse, there is bound to be someone stronger than you, no matter what you do and who you are. Number 8. Nightcrawler Spider-Man. Very recently, meaning this year, we have been introduced to the Sins of Sinister story arc, which is basically Mr. Sinister enacting a plan to take over the world and actually pretty much succeeding. There's a whole lot to this plan that kind of deserves its own point, but one part of his plan is using his cloning know-how to create chimeras. These essentially are spliced together versions of mutants and other heroes, so basically taking the already powerful mutant heroes and making them even more powerful by giving them a second power. There are some really cool mashups, but one of the spin-off comics from this event is X-Men Sins of Sinister Nightcrawlers. This comic features a team of spliced together Nightcrawlers who call themselves the Legion of the Night, and one of these splices puts the powers of Nightcrawler on a clone of Peter Parker. It's a blue-skinned man who can do whatever a spider can, but who can also bamf from place to place. I never knew it was something I needed, but it definitely is. Nightcrawler never gets enough love in my eyes, and he's definitely one of the coolest of the X-Men. Unfortunately, I think Marvel knows how powerful this combo would really be, so they dispose of this chimera in a pretty lame way, but in my eyes, unstoppable. Number 7. Spider-Pool. Okay, I'll be honest, we have like zero information on this alternate Spider-Man. During the Spider-Verse, we were introduced to so many versions of Spider-Man that to go through each and every one in detail would have left us with no actual Spider-Verse story, and that story is dope, so no. But good golly, I wish for this one character they would have. First spotted in issue 9 of The Amazing Spider-Man from 2014 in a tiny little panel is an alternate Spider-Man wielding a katana. We see him again from the back in issue 14, and then we finally see a frontal view of this Spider-Man in issue 15 when the suspicions are confirmed. There for all to see is a Spider-Man who is also dressed with elements of the character of Deadpool. Surviving the war with the Inheritors that took the life of so many alternate versions of Spider-Man, of course he would make it through. We can assume that this guy has all the Spider-Man powers, but if he's also Deadpool, then this version of Spider-Man also has that god-level healing factor, and based on the katanas, he is just as okay with being a complete psychopath. While we have no idea about this Spider-Pool's name, story, powers, or personality, we can make enough guesses to know that this guy is incredibly capable and most likely unstoppable. Number 6. Takuya Yamashiro. Instead of being Peter Parker, the Japanese Spider-Man, Spider-Man, is Takuya Yamashiro, a motocross racer and son of astrophysicist Dr. Hiroshi Yamashiro. Unlike most versions of Spider-Man, Takuya was introduced through a live-action Japanese Spider-Man TV show, and with that, his character differs quite a bit. For starters, his spider powers are a little less powerful due to the budget constraints for the show, which is a hilarious reason, but don't you dare think that this makes this guy a pushover. To make up for his less powerful spider powers, Takuya has a massive kaiju fighting mech named Lepardon, Power Ranger style with arm rockets, an absolutely giant sword, and a boomerang. He uses Lepardon and his spider abilities to fight the Iron Cross Army, which is a group of suspiciously human-looking aliens from an unnamed world who are led by, wait for it, Professor Monster. Nice. Due to his popularity and just how awesome he is, Takuya Yamashiro has become an official character in the multiverse coming from Earth 51778, fighting against the Inheritors alongside the Spider Army, and he is set to appear in the second animated Spider-Verse movie, which I am pumped to see. And at number 5 is Hulk Spider-Man. I don't have any problem constantly re-talking about this version of Spider-Man and the Hulk because it's freaking cool. Appearing in the Immortal Hulk with Great Power story, Peter Parker is granted the alter ego of the Hulk after Loki magically transfers the ability to him, taking it away from Bruce Banner. All the proportional spider powers mixed with the unstoppable force that is the green monstrosity of the Hulk. It's actually really cool. If not, a little silly to see the Hulk wearing a torn spider suit. And there are tons of hilarious moments in this story, like Spider-Hulk getting annoyed at the stupid sticky wall, which is just his wall crawling powers. Like, come on. Banner calls in the Fantastic Four with the hope of being able to fix the situation, and I personally wish they just left it so we could still have Spider-Hulk. But alas, the power of the Hulk is switched back to Banner with the help of the Fantastic Four and Banner's own genius. It's a short little story that seems almost self-contained, as if it is indeed an alternate universe story, but it's an insanely cool one, and a Spider-Hulk would be an incredibly powerful character if he were to show up again and learn how to overcome the rage thing. Number 4, Ghost Spider. Spider-Gwen, or as she has come to be known, Ghost Spider, is the Gwen Stacy from the alternate reality of Earth 65. In this reality, it is Gwen Stacy, not Peter Parker, who is bitten by a genetically engineered super spider. This bite granted her superhuman strength, speed, toughened flesh, and pretty much all the spider-based powers that the regular Spider-Man would possess. Plus, in my opinion, she has the best looking spider suit. After Gwen is depowered by Cindy Moon during her self-titled comic, Ghost Spider bonds with the Venom symbiote, and successfully too. Gwen has actually learned to find a very healthy balance with her symbiote. The symbiote itself enhances whatever emotions the host has, right? So, when she first bonded with Venom, thanks to a corrupt Matt Murdock, Kingpin, who she was forced to team up with, she was rage-fueled and looking for revenge against the Rhino for attacking her father, and eventually against Murdock himself. But over time, she realized that she needed to control that and give Venom better qualities to enhance in order to control and find balance with the symbiote. In a way, Venom actually helped Gwen to become a better hero. She is another fan-favorite alternate spider hero, and as such has featured in tons of stories. But if you're looking for something to read where Ghost Spider is featured, I suggest Edge of Spider-Verse, where she first appeared, and her own self-titled comic series Spider-Gwen Volume 1 from 2015. Number 3, Spider-Ham. Hailing from a universe where all the Marvel characters are replaced with anthropomorphic cartoon character animal versions of themselves, Peter Porker, yes that is his real name, is Spider-Ham, a pig. Now Peter Porker was actually born a spider named Peter, and he lived in the basement lab of May Porker, a scientist who had created, quote, the world's first atomic-powered hairdryer. Using this atomic hairdryer, May accidentally irradiated herself, and in a weird fit of rage I guess, she bit Peter the spider, which made him turn into an anthropomorphic pig, just like her, only with the relative powers of a spider. In his premiere issue, he would go on to do battle with Hulk Bunny, created when Bruce Bunny was trapped in an arcade cabinet and bombarded with gamma radiation, and I wish I was making that all up, but it really happened. Spider-Ham has most of the same abilities as 616 Spider-Man, only he has this rather unique ability called Spider Nonsense, which basically allows him to be more and more cartoony the more danger he is in, which is the perfect reason to have the wackiest nonsense happen that will save this piggy's hide in some of the most imaginative ways possible. Cartoon powers are incredibly powerful, bordering on reality warping, so this is a pretty unstoppable little piggy. Number 2, Miles Morales. Born to an African-American father and a Puerto Rican mother, Miles Morales of the 1610 universe was bitten by the Oz-enhanced spider that caused him to pass out and foam at the mouth. When he awoke, he discovered he had powers. Cool! He would go on to become the next Spider-Man of the Ultimate Universe, and people love him. Miles Morales is an incredible character. He has almost all of the regular spider abilities, plus some amazing powers unique to himself. Namely, his venom, which is like a form of bioelectricity that he can emit from his body and use in some really cool ways, like punches and beams and blasts, as well as at long range using his webbing, and that ain't all. Miles is also able to use a spider camouflage to make his whole body, and even his clothes and costumes somehow, go invisible. And apparently, he is immortal, as a side effect of the Oz formula that contributed to his abilities. Also, similar to Ghost Spider Gwen Stacy, who Miles may have a bit of a romance with in this universe, Miles' suit is just dope as hell. And finally, in at number 1 is May Parker. Earth X. It's a world where basically every single person has powers, things have gone apocalyptic, and where the daughter of Peter Parker, May Parker, is Venom. While her retired and cynical pops ain't too thrilled about it, she does actually have complete complete control over the symbiote thanks to her advanced genetic and honed spider sense. She was eventually under the control of this kid going by the name of the Red Skull, and thanks to her father and other Earth X classic heroes, she was saved. This Spider-Woman / Venom hybrid and her father Spider-Man go on to join a super-powered police force and fight crime and supervillainy threats together. Nice. She eventually, after the death itself, gets recruited by Kang the Conqueror as part of a multiversal team to fight the Apocalypse Twins. In addition to her proportional spider powers plus the enhanced spider sense, she gains all the usual symbiote powers as well, plus a few extra, like what seems to be a rudimentary form of telepathy, and 'tis believed her symbiote could go on to mutate further to gain more powers, which is a good way for Marvel to say, we can do whatever we want with this. She's definitely one of the cooler incarnations of both Spider-Man and Venom to grace the pages of comics. Kicking off the list at number 10 is Spider-Cat. Ah! It's a kitty! It's a little kitty cat Miles Morales. Or, I'm so sorry, Meows Morales. No, I'm not joking, that's actually his name. Look at his little cute face. Coming to us very briefly in the pages of Spider-Man Annual Volume 3, Number 1, Spider-Cat was one of the combatants in the first ever Secret War. Yes, that's Secret Wars, but animalified. He appeared for about 5 minutes when he was knocked into the window of the Watchdogs bar and had an extremely brief conversation with Howard the Duck and Spider-Ham, during which Meow's uncle, Uncle Heron, was mentioned, who in this animal universe has the evil alter ego of dun dun dun, the Growler. Ooh, nice. Unfortunately, the Celestial who was supervising this battle realm was just a big old grumpy grump and decided that he would completely destroy the place, including anyone who inhabited it. But I will hold out hope that we get to see Meows Morales once again in the future, at some point. Hopefully. Maybe. Number 9, Dark Ages. Dark Ages is, in my humble opinion, a pretty underrated story. Essentially, a superpowered machine known as the Unmaker was causing massive devastation in the core of the planet, and in an attempt to stop the threat, a portal created by Doctor Strange released an EMP that completely crippled the world's technology. The story essentially sees the world rebuilding itself without the use of any advanced technology, while also dealing with the many threats of the world, including werewolves, vampires, and supervillains, specifically the mutant apocalypse. Miles was one of the survivors of this new society, although here, Miles became bonded to the Venom symbiote, which he used to try and help during the first early years. They worked together well until the Carnage symbiote also forcibly bonded itself to Miles as well. Not like Carnage kicking out Venom, I'm talking Carnage corrupting Venom, and the two symbiotes both agreed to take over Miles' body. And they even went to work for Apocalypse in exchange for a starship to escape the Earth. All the while, Miles remained unconscious, being used as an unwilling host. It sounds horrifying, but the Venom Carnage combo was absolutely awesome in my opinion. A little scary, but awesome. Very awesome. Number 8, Deathlock. Just like what happens on Earth 616, the Miles Morales of Earth 807128 also eventually became a member of the Champions. However, while acting as a champion, Dr. Octopus opened up a portal to the Negative Zone, allowing Annihilus and the Annihilation Wave to come to Earth. Now, Miles, being a hero among heroes, confronted the invading wave, but because he's not that powerful, he was inevitably defeated. But luckily, instead of being outright robbed of his life, he was instead brought to Annihilus. Now, face to face with Annihilus, Miles ended up stealing the cosmic control rod that gives its wielder control over the Annihilation Wave. Only, instead of taking command of the wave, Miles instead swung away and using his Venom blasts, destroyed the rod completely, losing his own life in the process. It was after all of that he was later turned into a Deathlock. As a Deathlock, one of his missions was to hunt down Conan the Barbarian, whose presence in the present time was causing damage to the timeline. And all that takes place in Savage Avengers Volume 2 from 2022, and you can go read it yourself. Number 7, Spider-Man Life Story. The comic story Spider-Man Life Story sets itself apart from the rest of the Marvel multiverse by having no sliding time scale. Essentially, this means that Peter Parker and Miles Morales aged like they realistically would from the moment their comics were first issued. So for Miles, he always coexisted with Peter Peter Parker, gaining his powers in 2011 when he was 13 years old, when he was bitten by a radioactive spider. Now, during a time that Peter was missing, Miles took on the Spider-Man mantle until Peter finally came back and took Miles under his wing. Miles worked alongside Peter's resistance when Dr. Doom successfully overtook the Earth with the help from Dr. Octopus. Now, Miles and Peter were key members of the resistance, but unbeknownst to Dr. Doom, Doc Ock was essentially gaining knowledge to swap his consciousness into the body of Spider-Man, just like he did in the Superior Spider-Man arc, which eventually he did, only this time it was Miles, trapping Miles in Octavius's failing body. Now, being a lot older than the Peter we are used to, Peter Parker figured out what Otto had done, convinced him to undo it, and then sacrificed himself to free the Earth of Dr. Doom. When Otto actually kept his word and returned Miles to his own body, Miles was given Mary Jane's blessing to carry on as this world's main Spider-Man at the age of around 21 years old. That was confusing. Number 6. Spider Mole. Look, we've already got Spider Ham, a pig, and we have Spider Cat, which is a cat. So I mean, it kinda just makes sense that we gotta have a Spider Mole. And that's exactly what we got in all new, all different Avengers Annual number 1 from August of 2016. Spider Mole was, yes, you guessed it, an anthropomorphic mole with the proportionate abilities of a spider. Does it sound completely bonkers? Yes. Are we surprised? Nope! Or, at least, we really shouldn't be. Spider-Mole used his awesome spider powers to become a superhero who would often spend his time with Hiss Marvel. Yes, that's Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, as a snake. When the villain, Quack-O-Lantern, broke into a bank, Spider-Mole and Hiss Marvel were there to save the day before they went back to their date. Ooh la la, fancy pantsy fancy, wow. Number 5, Earth 1048. Finally! It's the Miles Morales from the acclaimed Marvel's Spider-Man video game. This version of Miles ranks among quite a few people's favorites, and I think that is more than fair considering just how awesome each game from this series has been so far. Miles' standalone game, while shorter than the first, was in some ways an improvement over its predecessor. In the original game, though, is where we got his origin. When Miles' father was going to be awarded at the New York City Hall for his heroic acts helping Spider-Man, Martin Lee, acting as his evil alter ego, Mr. Negative, attacked as part of his revenge plot against the mayor Norman Osborn. There's a whole lot going on here. Miles' father's passing caused Miles to become distant and reckless to the point of trying to fight criminals by himself, which is when he was saved by Spider-Man. Meeting his hero was a big deal for Miles, and they kind of became like unofficial friends when Spider-Man suggested that Miles help out at the shelter alongside Mary Jane and Aunt May. It was here, while helping move boxes at the shelter, that a genetically altered spider that had hitched a ride on Mary Jane Watson's jacket from a secret lab at Norman Osborn's apartment jumped off Mary Jane and made its way down to the boxes Miles was moving, causing him to be bitten. That's the Sparks Notes version of that story. You'll have to watch or play the game yourself to learn his whole story. I'm personally excited to see where his character goes in the second game when it finally comes out. Number 4, Earth 42. Okay, before we jump into anything here, if you have not seen the animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie yet, and you don't want spoilers, then I suggest that you may want to skip ahead to our third spot today. I repeat, spoiler warning ahead. Okay, as most of you know, Miles Morales was born to Jefferson Morales and Rio Morales in Brooklyn, New York. That's the same here on Earth 42. However, on Earth 42, Miles was supposed to become the Spider-Man, only the spider that was supposed to bite him was actually teleported to Earth 1610B, where it bit the Miles Morales from the first Spider-Verse movie and then later lost its life. This left Earth 42 with no Spider-Man to protect it. Another factor that altered the life of this Miles Morales was the passing of his father, Jefferson. This left Miles being raised by his uncle, Aaron Davis. This inadvertently led to Miles donning what would have been his uncle's suit and becoming this universe's Prowler. Okay, now we can move on. Number 3, Married. This one is an interesting one, specifically because the Earth that this Miles calls home, Earth 8, is actually a possible future of yet another alternate Earth, Earth 65. In Earth 8, Miles Morales ends up marrying the Gwen Stacy Spider-Woman of another alternate Earth, and as a superhero duo, they become pretty famous celebrities. Alongside their two children, Spider-Girl and Spider-Boy, plus Spider-Ham, Penny Parker, Jerry Drew, and this really cool Craven-looking Spider-Woman, Miles and Gwen led the Amazing Eight, this world's greatest superhero team. While Miles and Gwen were on their second honeymoon in Vanaheim, Gwen's younger self from Earth 65 accidentally arrived in Earth 8's New York and went to the Amazing Eight, and specifically Spider-Ham, for help to fight Silk back in her reality. Unbeknownst to Miles or Earth 8 Gwen, the 6 other members of the Amazing Eight did indeed go and help the Gwen from Earth 8. From Earth 65. Earth 8? Earth 60? Earth 65. God damn it. Number 2, Mind Spinner. For some reason, when Marvel decided to give us Miles Morales, I guess they couldn't think of any really unique or creative stories, so, just like Peter Parker, Miles got his own Clone Saga storyline. Was it necessary? Maybe not. Did it have awesome stuff? You bet your pants it did. In case you haven't guessed yet, Mind Spinner was indeed a clone of Miles. Unlike Miles though, Mind Spinner had actual physical spider qualities, meaning he had actual massive spider legs, which is just terrifying. But beyond that, Mind Spinner also didn't develop the ability to speak. Instead, he seemed to have psionic abilities which he could also turn into telepathic attacks. Mind Spinner and his brothers escaped and tried to find a way to stay alive as they were not going to last due to their unstable cells and rapid aging processes. Now, Mind Spinner and his brother Salim were arguably the more sinister of the Miles clones, and in their desperation to save their own lives, they would try and attack Miles' family, with Mind Spinner specifically going for his mom. Luckily, Miles was able to stop him. It wasn't until another of Miles' clones saved the day that the other clones began to turn on each other, and Mind Spinner and Salim ended up destroying each other, leaving just one clone left. And in at number 1, it's Shift. That other clone would be Shift. Shift is pretty unique compared to the other two clones. While Salim and Mind Spinner had more spider-like or Miles-like abilities, Shift himself was considered a failed clone due to his unstable form. But this was actually just part of his shape-shifting abilities. Shift can expand, contract, or stretch his own mass. He has grown multiple limbs and even changed his whole appearance to that of a monster before. He's quite cool, but what's even cooler is that unlike his brothers, Shift seems to have a bit more of a heroic morality. At one point, when he was left alone to guard Miles while Mind Spinner and Salim went off to attack Miles' family, Shift instead helped out his genetic template. He was the one to save Miles' sister from Salim, which caused the clone to attack Shift, which caused Mind Spinner to attack Salim, and that is how the other two clones passed away, leaving just Shift as the last remaining clone and an ally to Miles. There's a really cool story where Shift and Miles take on Salim from a different reality, but that's a tale for another time, so sorry. Coming in at number 10 is Twinkie Spider-Man. While originally a crossover advertisement deal between Marvel Comics and Hostess, you know, the company that owns Twinkies, Snowballs, and those cupcake snack pastries, the Spider-Man of Earth 51914 is an official member of the Spider-Verse, being defeated by Morlun in the first Spider-Verse comic in 2014. But Morlun has defeated many spider totems, it's his whole thing. This sweet Spider-Man has all the same powers as our 616 spider-based hero, only he has the added benefit of using Hostess snacks as equipment, whether it be to distract, lure, and reason with criminals, and even get out of tight spots in his relationship, like when he gave Mary Jane a cupcake so he could slip away to fight crime. The power of sweet pastries should not be undervalued. Using his pastry-based equipment, he was able to defeat The Fly, Printout Man, Simon the Evil Swami, Madame Web, Legal Eagle, an unnamed jewel thief, Chairman, Homewrecker, Demolition Derby, Photoman, Hotshot, Junjitsu, Larcenorous Lil, and the Human Computer. So yeah, it's not just a sponsor, it is an added ability that puts him a little bit of a cut above, in my opinion. Number 9, Spider-Man Noir. A grittier, more serious, and ruthless world calls for a Peter Parker who's pretty much the same, and the Spider-Man Noir is definitely that guy. After he seeks out revenge on the Goblin for taking away the life of his Uncle Ben, he goes to a warehouse where a spider idol containing thousands of spiders is broken. One of these spiders bites Peter and Bob's your uncle. Peter has visions of a spider god and is granted abilities. He is granted most of the same powers as regular Spider-Man with a bit bit less strength and a stronger healing factor, but with the ability to use organic webbing, Spider-Man Noir may not be the most powerful character in the Spider-Verse. There are plenty of others who have added abilities or play a larger hand in the conflict, but he has the power of popularity on his side, being a fan favorite character ever since his introduction, which is why, in my opinion, he's one of the few alternate Spider-Man to survive more Lund, despite whatever excuse the comic gave. Also, he looks super cool. Hey nerds! Before we carry on, be sure to check out our channel and subscribe for more comic book content just like this. Alright, let's flip back to the list. Number 8. Penny Parker. This Parker from Earth 14512 doesn't actually have any powers of her own, and while that may make her a little bit of a strange choice for an unstoppable Spider-Man list, she makes up for it with the totally awesome mech spider suit worn by her father before his demise, and that is half controlled by a radioactive spider. First appearing in Edge of Spider-Verse number 5 in October of 2014, Penny and the spider mech are essentially able to do anything you'd expect from a Spider-Man, and technically she doesn't actually have any written limitations yet. Yes, that's a lame reason for her to be so powerful, but it's a legit reason all the same. The mech suit is outfitted with weapons for basically any situation a story calls for, and defenses that would put pretty much any other Spider-Man to shame. Penny also played a pretty prominent role in the animated Spider-Verse movie, and she's become an extremely popular character, which, as we know, makes her just a smidge more powerful. Number 7. Superior Spider-Man. This one is a little odd. It's Dr. Otto Octavius, yes, Doc Ock, but nearing his mortal end, he switches bodies with Peter Parker, sending Peter off to Spidey Heaven, temporarily, and Otto finds himself taking on the heroic role of Spider-Man. But he isn't evil! Being in the body of Peter gave Otto an insight into Peter's life and motivation, and actually gave him a change of heart. Now, we have a Spider-Man with all the powers of Peter Parker, but the super genius intellect and cold heart of Otto Octavius. Spider-Ock, or as people call him, Spock, changes things. He took his genius and experience and applied it, making an awesome new suit, spider-bots, and mechanical arms. He also straight up took a few villains to their graves, and even single-handedly defeated the Sinister Six, taking the Living Brain as a trophy. He completely dumps MJ, which is kind of a downside, but starts a relationship with Anna Maria Marconi, who became a popular addition to the Spider-Man canon. He purged Carly Cooper of the Goblin Serum, helped Aunt May walk again, got Peter his PhD, mainly for clout, and built a scientific empire that would make him a multi-billionaire. And a version of him played a huge role in the Spider-Verse event, even leading a whole team of spider totems. Number 6. Zombie Spider-Man. Yes, Zombie Spider-Man is essentially the same Spider-Man everyone is used to. All the same powers at least, except after being bit by a zombie, he now also has a ravenous hunger that cannot be sated no matter what, combined with the fact that he is essentially undead and can take a whole whack more punishment. Both of those factors led him and a group of other heroes to consume the Silver Surfer and Galactus, which gave them all the cosmic power, or the power cosmic, however you want to say it. With this power cosmic, the zombie Galacti, which is what they call themselves, have the ability to absorb and tap ambient cosmic energy into their bodies at will and expel those energies, like channeling beams of energy through their hands and teleporting through time and space, devouring entire planets. With this power, they have the potential to phase through objects, accelerate the evolution of life forms, see the past by peeling back the layers of time travel, and to manipulate, absorb, and discharge any form of energy or radiation. But they mainly use it to get their next snack. Though Spider-Zombie loses all of this power, he still had it and was an incredibly powerful version of Spider-Man, and he kept surviving into the new zombie world they eventually ended up on. Number 5. Peter Parker of Earth 92100. You'd think the addition of extra arms for a Spider-Man would be an added benefit. When it happened to Peter in the 616 universe though, he freaked the hell out and pretty quickly got rid of the extra limbs using the DNA of Michael Morbius. To be honest, if I sprouted 2 extra sets of arms, I'd probably be a little freaked out too. I also kinda wonder how the musculature of your body would change, but I'm getting off topic. On Earth 92100, when Peter grew his extra limbs, unfortunately, Morbius did not live long enough to help Peter because he was eaten by sharks, which meant that Peter kind of had to just deal with it. Well, what do you know, turns out during a fight with Doc Ock, after Peter embraced his extra appendages, they actually give him a distinct advantage. The added arms seem to grant him much more strength and agility, and using them he is even able to save Gwen Stacy from her demise at the hands of the Green Goblin. Unfortunately, these arms don't really protect him from the Inheritors, but they didn't really beat him. Instead, he sacrificed himself to save Spider-Man 2099 1999, and Lady Spider from the Inheritors in Spider-Man 2099 Volume 2 Number 6 in 2014. Number 4. Silk. Cindy Moon's first appearance in the comics was actually as a cameo in issue 1 of the 2014 Amazing Spider-Man reboot. In that comic, we see the events that lead to Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man. A spider gets caught in a particle collider and becomes heavily irradiated, and then it goes off to bite Peter Parker. But after this spider drops off Peter, it crawls along the floor before climbing onto and biting the ankle of a random girl who also happened to be there as well. This girl was Cindy Moon. Just like Peter Parker, Cindy Moon gained amazing spider-related abilities. Cindy got the attention of a man known as Ezekiel Sims, who came and took her away and began training her in how to use her powers for good. He was a mentor and a father figure for her while she was with him, and after he discovered that Morlun was tracking her, he and Cindy agreed that she should be hidden away. That is, until Peter Parker found her. Silk possesses an extrasensory hyper, danger, or silk sense, which is more advanced than the spider sense of Spider-Man and other spider totems. It allows her to react significantly faster in combat for starters, but it also has superior range, and can even sense the identity of an attacker before a fight even begins. Cindy can also weirdly spin webs from her fingertips, and on top of that, she was the avatar of a powerful spider totem called the Bride, which made her play an integral part of the huge multiversal Spider-Verse event from 2014. Number 3. Mayday Parker. First appearing in a What If comic, specifically number 105 from December 1997, the daughter of Peter Parker and Mary Jane from a future alternate world, Earth 982, Mayday Parker becomes Spider-Girl and eventually Spider-Woman, and fills the role that her father once held as the next generation of heroes. Where she is only slightly weaker than Peter in the strength department, she is much more agile and has a stronger, more precise spider sense. But her ability to stick to surfaces is considerably more powerful than Peter's as well. However, wall crawling does not come as naturally to May, and she has to concentrate to stick to surfaces. She also has the ability to transmit this ability through objects for short distances. So, as an example, Spider-Girl could stick to the floor and transmit the electrostatic stickiness through the floor, making everyone and everything stuck in place to the floor. I said floor a lot, and that was kind of weird. But what's even cooler is that she can reverse the ability, and instead of stick, she can repel off a surface. This adds power to her jumps, but it can also be used to repel people and objects away from her at a pretty considerable speed. Number 2. Kane Parker. The Clone Saga of the 90s is considered to be pretty infamous by fans of Spider-Man, but while it introduced a lot of strange elements into the continuity, it also added some pretty amazing characters in the form of Ben Reilly and Kane Parker, two somewhat overlooked but powerful Spider-Man clones from that saga. Kane is a great character with a really great arc that even saw him have his own Scarlet Spider series. Now his powers are almost identical to Peter Parker, but luckily for him, these powers were slightly altered thanks to him being a clone. While we're on the topic of power-ups though, there is a reason I chose Kane for this spot over Ben Reilly, who seems to be the more popular clone. Thanks to an ancient prophecy involving spider totems, Kane could transform into a giant tarantula-like monster known as the Other. On top of his spider powers, he gained venomous bone-like stingers which extended from his forearms, night vision, and enough power to defeat the leader of the Inheritors in the Spider-Verse event, before he was set back to normal. And in at number 1, Spider-Man. Just good old friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He is essentially the face of Marvel Comics, and almost everyone who just knows of comic books knows of Spider-Man. Sure, Spider-Man has been defeated and even lost his life, but he always comes back, and there is a very low possibility that he will ever be brought down for good. Spider-Man has got more than popularity though. He is also very inspiring, actually really strong, and incredibly intelligent. He is seen and respected as one of the most righteous and brave heroes around, and his heroic attitude, sense of responsibility, almost perfect moral compass, and quick wit make him beloved by not only fans but other heroes and even some villains. But above all that, it's his willpower that I think makes him truly unstoppable. Even in the face of certain death, Spider-Man will always get back to his feet, which has allowed him to use his incredible abilities to perform truly incredible feats. Speaking of his powers, Spider-Man possesses the proportional powers of a spider, like we all know, but he's still done things that even a human-sized spider would not be able to do, and his spider sense gives him an edge in battle battle that, combined with his other abilities, has made him next to unstoppable. And even when placed beside all the other Spider-Men and Spider-Women of the Spider-Verse event, he was acknowledged as the most powerful one.
Number 10. Man-Spider. Man-Spider is a version of Peter who ended up mutating and having multiple arms from the main continuity. It was a pretty freaky time in Peter's life and happened after Spider-Man tried to create a cure to get rid of his abilities and return him to his normal, old, depowered self. Unfortunately for Peter, this definitely did not work as planned and instead just left him with 4 arms instead of 2. Basically the opposite of the desired effect, leaving him more freaky than normal, which was kind of what he was going for. There is a version of the 4-armed Spider-Man who actually ended up keeping the arms instead of getting rid of them, and he hails from the reality of Earth 1298 and is known as Man-Spider, obviously. I'm guessing that having a secret identity would be pretty tricky for someone like Man-Spider. Number 9. Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man had an upbringing among monsters, and for that reason can be considered kinda monstrous. His appearance isn't super monstrous, although he does share his editorial name with a series that seems to feature a pretty frightening looking mainstream Savage Spider-Man, which we may or may not talk about later. Savage Spider-Man of Earth 83043 ended up getting his powers from growing up in the Savage Lands. His story is that he was lost there after the plane he was on with his parents crashed. His parents died in the crash, but young Peter survived and was taken in by the giant spiders of Savage Land, whose toxic bites helped him to build up both an immunity to toxins and also granted him spider-like superpowers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you haven't already, please head on over to Facebook where you can follow us there as well. It really does help us out here and it helps us out there, so yeah, just help us out. And also thanks for doing that. If you've already done that. You're like, I get it, Amanda, you say it every time. Just want to make sure you know. Number 8. Scarlet Spider. Kane was one of the clones of Peter Parker that we got to know in the Clone Saga. He typically goes by the mantle of Scarlet Spider now, which at one point was actually used by another Peter clone, Ben Reilly. Initially in the comics, Kane was presented more as a villain, or at least a misunderstood villain. He misunderstood hero. He wasn't really completely a straight up villain, but he did some shady things. He was a clone that was basically defective, and as a result his degeneration messed with his mind. He also came with the Mark of Cain, which was pretty monstrous, which allowed him to seemingly burn the skin of those he touched, typically leaving his Mark of Cain on their face. In reality, this was just a variation of Spider-Man's wall crawl power, as when Spider-Man crawls on walls, this is because of little hook hairs basically in his hands and feet, which allow him to stick. See the Sam Raimi movies for that in person. Similar deal for Kane, but he was using this to basically melt people's faces at the time. Number 7. Ghost Spider. Not to be confused with the other Ghost Spider, Gwen Stacy of Earth 65, this Ghost Spider is an alternate version of Peter Parker from Earth 11638. In this reality, Uncle Ben did not die and was there to help mentor Peter Parker as he continued on his journey as a hero. Peter here became not just a celebrity and an icon as a superhero, but was also a successful business owner and a philanthropist. However, in secret, he and Ben were working together to lure other Spider-Men from other realities to their world so that they could zap them of their power, killing them in the process in order to bolster Earth 11638 Spider-Man, transferring their powers to him and making him stronger. In the end, Spider-Man of Earth 616, who fell into this trap, helped Earth 11638 Peter Parker to see the error of his ways. Having a change of heart, this version of Spider-Man sacrificed himself to save 616 Peter, ending up in a coma as a result. He was returned to life by an alternate Sorcerer Supreme who needed his help, and then came back as the Ghost Spider, who kinda looks like a blue flame Ghost Rider. Number 6. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man comes from his own self-titled series, which spins out of Non-Stop Spider-Man. So if you wanted to read Savage Spider-Man, I'd recommend going back and reading that first. I think it's only like 5 issues, so it's also not too long. This story, I believe, is part of the mainstream continuity, so technically the Peter Parker that we see here in his monstrous form is in fact Earth 616 Peter Parker. In the Non-Stop Spider-Man series, there was even mention of the Beyond Corporation, which also helped me to really cement this, at least in my mind, as part of the main continuity canon. I mean, I saw it was kind of listed as that, but I was skeptical, and then I saw that and I was like, nah, no, it's probably main continuity. I think we can definitely say it's main continuity. So hopefully I am right and not wrong about that. But while this is technically 616, it's also a very specific look and time in Peter's life, like back when he had those 4 arms, which we kind of touched on earlier. So I figured I could count it for the purpose of this list. It's also where our thumbnail for this video will likely come from, so thought it might be cool to explain it if you're like, hey, what's that thing? That's Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man is Earth 616 Peter Parker mutated mutated by the drug known as A+, which typically improves performance at the cost of intelligence for most users. However, for Spider-Man, due to his unique physiology, it also turned him into a kinda like part man, part spider monster hybrid thing. Poor Peter. Number 5. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is definitely one of the creepiest ideas for an alternate Spider-Man that we've seen in maybe ever. This version of Peter Parker was actually consumed by spiders, but his consciousness was also absorbed by them. So while physically he's gone, mentally he kinda like lives on in them. He's literally a Spider-Man made of spiders. Hence the name Spiders-Man. He has a tragic backstory, but don't feel too bad for him. He also would be the one to team up with a Norman Osborn version of Spider-Man, plotting to betray the rest of the spider army that he had been recruited to. And he also, as a bunch of spiders, seems to enjoy kinda eating people, a taste he developed as time went on. Number 4. Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of the vilest alternates of Spider-Man around. He shows up during our exploration of the Spider-Verse, where we learn that he is a fairly sadistic alternative Peter Parker whose hobbies include things like burning ants with a magnifying glass on hot sunny days and spying on his neighbor whom he's kinda obsessed with, Sarah Jane. Patton of course is likely twisted in part because it is heavily implied that his uncle mistreats him. He is bitten by a spider, but instead of gaining miraculous abilities that all in all make him a more responsible person and a hero, he becomes a spider-like creature, mutating and becoming more monstrous and murderous, both inside and out. Yikes. Number 3. Poison. Poison is an alternate version of Peter Parker inspired by the Spider-Man story The Other. He hails from a what if where we explore the idea of what would have happened had Spider-Man rejected his connection to the spider within and rejected instead of embracing his role as a spider totem. This would have left Peter vulnerable basically to outside attack. Trapped within his cocoon with no way out, the symbiotic being that we often refer to as Venom sensed Peter's vulnerability and saw a chance to merge with him. Venom then leaves his current host Matt Gargan to forcibly connect with Peter, and together they become Poison. Poison is horrifying and attempts to recruit Mary Jane as his partner, but after she rejects him, he believes that the corpse of Gwen Stacy will suit him better. Oh dear. Number 2. Matt Gargan. Matt Gargan is known as the Spider-Man villain Scorpion, but at one point he too became an alternate version of Spider-Man, albeit a really messed up and twisted version, as he served as Spider-Man for Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, which was primarily made up of villains posing as heroic counterparts. In Mac's case, the heroic mantle he was made to fill in for was Spider-Man, although he wasn't so much Spider-Man but kinda like an alternate Venom posing as Spider-Man. His suit was made of the symbiotic being known as Venom, who was merged with him at the time, and was also like really juiced. But Norman fixed it so that he wouldn't appear as juiced. He still kinda got like a little giant. He got a little giant when it came to him attacking people though. This often turned Matt Gargan's Spider-Man into a horrifying monster who threatened to, and often actually did, devour those people who stood in his way, even sometimes almost eating his own teammate, which obviously they did not like. Number 1. I-APEC. I-APEC is known in Marvel Comics as I-APEC the Decapitator, and was once worshipped as a god in Peru. Remember how we talked about Man-Spider earlier? I-APEC is like a more terrifying version of that being. He is typically known as having pointed teeth, snakes for hair with multiple arms, and his lower half being the hairy body and legs of a spider. He ended up getting recruited to Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers to act as their Spider-Man after Matt Gargan was Spider-Man, because this was a different version of Spider-Man, a different version of the Dark Avengers, after Norman Osborn escaped the Raft the second time, this time successfully, and then attempted to resurrect Hammer and bring back the Dark Avengers. I-APEC was made to look more humanoid, more like Spider-Man with a genetic formula, except for the fact that, you know, he had 4 arms still, so almost like Spider-Man, but not quite. Later on, he would also be coerced into serving on Luke Cage's Dark Avengers, which were kinda like DC's Suicide Squad at the time. Number 10. Peter B. Parker. This alternate future version of Peter Parker hails from the Into the Spider-Verse multiverse. He is the older, mid-30s to approaching, perhaps middle-aged Spider-Man, also known as Peter B. Parker, with the B in his name presumably standing for Benjamin, like the main continuity Peter of 616. In this reality, Peter is all grown up. He settles down with MJ only to later get divorced, as Mary Jane wanted kids but Peter wasn't ready. It's clear that this Peter Parker regrets some of his life choices, namely seemingly hurting MJ and wants her back. He is pulled into Miles' reality thanks to Kingpin's Super Colliders experiments. Peter attempts to train Miles while also teaming up with him to defeat Kingpin and return both himself and the other alternate Spider folks back to their home realities before it's too late. Number 9. Officer Parker. In the alternate future of Earth X, Peter and Mary Jane's daughter May does not die and instead lives, growing up to become that reality's Venom. MJ dies of cancer before things start to get wild on Earth X, leaving Peter to take care of his daughter alone. Their relationship becomes strained as Peter doesn't believe that May can actually control the symbiote, when in reality, she can. In this future, Peter's identity is also revealed to the public by Norman Osborn when he takes over the Daily Bugle, which also runs the paper out of business due to the revelation that the hero they called a supposed menace had been on their payroll the whole time. Eventually, Peter is convinced to join the New York police force by Luke Cage, and he works hard to protect the people of New York and later their scarce food supply, when the polls are reversed and New York freezes over as a result. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about future alternate versions of Spidey, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Final Stand Spider-Man. Not all future Spider-Men finish life happy, and not all of them even are still considered heroes in the end. With Final Stand Spider-Man, the world is a lot more bleak in this future. This is an alternate future version of Peter Parker from a possible future that Madam Web gets a glimpse into. Here, Peter Parker ends up killing Kraven the Hunter and goes on to kill Dr. Octopus. He ends up betraying those he loves, and in the end, when the NYPD hunt him down, giving him an opportunity to surrender and admit to his crimes, Spider-Man refuses. He is shot and killed in this final stand. Number 7. Avengers Forever. This is actually a version of future Spider-Man often referred to as Spider-Man 2099. Not the Spider-Man 2099 though, as I said, this is an alternate version of that alternate version of Spider-Man. This Spider-Man 2099 is still Miguel O'Hara, but instead of hailing from the 2099 reality of Earth 928, this version of Miguel hails from the reality of Earth 98120, as seen in the 90s comic series Avengers Forever. In this alternate future, Miguel ends up joining the Avengers, but unfortunately later meets his end at the totemic life force draining hands of Morlun the Inheritor during the Spider-Verse event. Number 6. The CEO. As we said before, not all future versions of Spider-Man are heroes. Case in point, the Peter Parker who is still alive in 2099, as seen in the story from the 2011 video game, Spider-Man Edge of Time. Here, Peter Parker lives on to the year 2099 thanks to anti-aging tech. He fakes his own death as Spider-Man and operates in the shadows, becoming the CEO of the company Alchemex. He is one of the villains of the game who Spider-Man 2099 Miguel O'Hara must face in the end. Although Peter ends up a secret antagonist and villain, his goal at least is somewhat altruistic here. Peter wants to rewrite the timeline so that he can bring back all those that he's lost during his time as a hero. In the end, this Peter presumably gets erased from the time stream after a younger version of Peter Parker is convinced to not go down this path and never become the CEO of Alchemex. Number 5. Spider-Man 2211. Spider-Man 2211 is like Spider-Man 2099, but from even farther into the future. He is known as a time spinner and does his best to protect the time field. This version of Spider-Man is named Max Bourne, and his appearance also differs from the Spider-Man of Earth 616 and the Spider-Man of 2099 in the regard that his costume has multiple mechanized arms. Kinda like Dr. Octopus, or more specifically Dr. Octopus's look when he became Spider-Man and was known as Superior Spider-Man. Max Bourne's arch nemesis is Hobgoblin of 2211, who it turns out is actually his own daughter, Robin. Gasp. Along with Spider-Man of Earth 616 and Spider-Man of 2099, he faces and defeats Hobgoblin only for her true identity to be revealed to him. Number 4. Reign. Specifically, Spider-Man Reign. This future version of Spider-Man hails from an even bleaker reality than Final Stand Spider-Man, hailing from the comic known as Spider-Man Reign. Here, Peter ends up working at a flower shop after years of being a hero. No longer operating as Spider-Man, this version of Peter has become somewhat senile, frail, and old. He is also haunted by his past, having hallucinations of Mary Jane, who is now long dead. Mary Jane in this reality apparently died from being close to Peter, which he carries immense thinks guilt over. Apparently his radioactiveness was not so good for MJ's body, ended up giving her cancer and sadly killed her in the end. Peter eventually does return to heroics, but even then, it's a pretty sad return, with him mostly getting his butt whooped when he isn't busy being swept up in some kind of fantasy or hallucination of his past. Number 3. MC2. In the MC2 reality of Earth 982, Peter Parker actually gets to grow up and settle down with MJ. The two do end up married with kids, with daughter Mayday Parker successfully being born. May grows up to have spider powers like her dad and eventually becomes known as the hero Spider-Girl, living up to her family legacy and becoming a hero in her own right herself. Peter and MJ in this reality also have another child, May's younger brother Benji. Benji as a youngster also displays abilities and powers. He also goes on to have an adventure as a little tyke with Carnage, unintentionally bonding with the symbiote. Fortunately, his older sister May is able to save him, although for a time Ben would actually suffer from permanent hearing loss as a result of that rescue. Number 2. Jerry Drew. In the same future that MC2 Peter hails from, known as the alternate reality of Earth 982, Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, also has a child. MC2 is notoriously known for being the reality where superheroes get to grow up, retire, or settle down to live a somewhat normal life, possibly amidst continued heroics for those, of course, who don't retire. As such, Jessica is also one of those heroes. She gets married and ends up pregnant, but unfortunately her son Jerry is born with a rare bloodborne illness. In an attempt to cure Jerry, Jessica submits him to the same experimentation which saved her as a child and also gave her spider powers. The same happens to Jerry, who also gets spider powers and ends up becoming a hero, taking up the mantle Spider-Man, after being inspired by stories that his mom tells him of her days as a hero and of Spider-Man's adventures. Number 1. Spider-Man 2099. What would a future Spider-Man list be without the future Spider-Man? That's right, we're talking about Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. Or just Spider-Man really, as he's known in his own world, because it is 2099, so people don't just go like, hey, that's that hero 2099 and that's that villain 2099. 2099 is often thought of as being the future for the main comic book continuity of Earth 616. Here Miguel wasn't always actually the most altruistic guy, which I think is part of what makes him so cool as a character. He's got flaws. And becoming Spider-Man is part of his journey to becoming a better person. He becomes better as an individual as he becomes a hero. Miguel also comes with a futuristic look and some future tech as well. He got powers after submitting himself to his own experiments in the hopes of ridding himself of an addiction that was forced on him by the company he worked for, Alchemex, in order to prevent him from quitting. That's a pretty intense way to try to get someone to not quit. Be like, well, we create this substance and we're gonna give it to you without you knowing, and now you have an addiction to it, and now you have to keep working for us if you want that thing. So there you go. But thank goodness Miguel found a way around that.